Rick, how you doing, man?
Hello, Keith Jones. How are you, man? You look great. I love your background there. That's pretty snazzy.
Oh, thank you, man. It's just a red wall in the studio with my little plastic plant, and I got my little props, man. I'm an amateur at best, but it's giving off a nice little vibe, man. That blue, whew, I like that blue on you.
I was telling you off camera, this is the only thing I got going for myself today, right? Look at those walls behind me. It looks dreary and like I'm in a jail, So I feel like I am today, actually.
Oh, man.
But thank you.
Well, it's a good day for us to talk and, get the practice on and just kind of share. So what I thought we'd talk about today as one of our topics would be impermanence. So if you don't mind defining it for the audience, I think that would be great. And then, before you do that, I want to share what inspired it. I mean, today I lost a dear personal friend who was like family to me. And she passed away earlier this week. And she was family to a lot of people. And if they didn't know her to that level, to that extent, what is true about that is that they were inspired by her example. She was like you, man. She had gotten to her 70th decade, and did it in fine fashion, incredible athlete, but really an inspiration of healthy living and mindset. And so, she passed away this week, and I thought this would be a timely topic. Others may benefit from us having this podcast, but I certainly know that I will. So
well, that's a wonderful topic. It's actually touched both of us. Earlier this month, actually it's tail end of last month, but my ex-wife, with whom I was still friends and had been married almost 20 years, passed away unexpectedly, like your close friend did as well, from a heart attack. And as in your case and mine, both people were great. They looked healthy, they were happy, and all of a sudden they were there one moment, and then the next morning you wake up and they're gone. And they had no clue it was happening. And of course, none of the other people did either. It wasn't as if you had, time to prepare by watching someone decline, and medications don't work, and you kind of know ahead of time what's going to happen. No, this was like a buddy that you have breakfast with, and then you hear at lunchtime he's dead. It's really crazy. So the topic of impermanence is important to both you and I at this time in our lives.
Yeah, I certainly agree. And I'm just grateful that you and I have the kind of relationship to where we can lean on each other during times like this. And we certainly have. Can you define for our audience what impermanence is?
Well, I guess for me, I would think that first of all, the idea, it captures two concepts. One, it captures the idea that the only true rule in the world, I think, is that everything changes. Everything is constantly in flux. And impermanence just underscores the fact that you must not ever lose sight of the fact that everything is always changing. And that to the extent that you attach, and you overly attach, you're going to suffer. So that's one of the concepts I think impermanence captures. The other one is a sense of, and this is only through the lens of humanity, because animals don't feel this, but that is a sense of melancholy. I think that we're all, to some degree, attached to the way things are. Even people who are struggling in life, they're always, I think, anchors for people to believe in. And if you don't have much, you at least want to keep what you have. And if you have a great deal, you want more. So I think part of the human condition is this melancholy, this sadness over the idea that things change and things go away and things are impermanent. So impermanence to me is, number one, constant change, and number two, the human nature of thinking that that's kind of sad and gives rise to a melancholy sort of feeling.
Man, you defined that beautifully, man. So
Oh, thanks.
you really did. And I was hoping that that would be your definition, because I know you are really learned when it comes to the spirituality line with, you know, Zen and Buddhism. And that's, you know, those are some of those noble truths about life and the pillars that they're built on, which is this idea of life changing and impermanence and being attached to things remaining a certain way, whether it's a ideal or it's a person or material things, whatever that may be, and that the suffering comes when you're attached to it or overly attached. And for my personal case this week, when I learned the news about my dear friend, it was, I experienced that level of suffering, and just trying to reconcile that absence of that kind of grieving and suffering doesn't mean that I don't care, or that I'm not affected, or that they didn't mean that to me if I'm not suffering. And I don't think that you have to have an argument or it like that at all. You know, people process death differently, and there is no right or wrong way to process it. For me, as I've shared many times, is I'm just really committed to not suffering, man. So, and for me, it led me to visit what I was attached to if I was suffering. The losses that I've experienced in my life, and not that happened to me because nothing happens to you, but the losses that I've experienced or observed have been that affected me in a way. I've seen people, you know, I know people that have passed away that I've known, but that have really affected me. Was an aunt who I was really, really fond of growing up as a kid. When she was 18 years old back in the 50s, she was hit by a truck
No.
and crossing the street after work. And she laid in the street before, this is in the South, and before anyone came to her aid. And they didn't do a good job of taking care of her after the accident. So she had this limp, and she was, everyone said that she was in pain a lot. But this woman, Rick, never complained about the pain that she had to be in. You know, you knew she was in pain because she was like, okay, just give me a minute. You know, or she run around with us in the yard when she was babysitting us and things like this. And at this time, she had to be in like her 50s or 60s back then when I was a little kid, or maybe 60s. And she would say, hey, give Auntie a second to sit down here for a second to catch my breath, and we'll get back at it. And she could outfish anybody that you can think of who's a superior fisherman. And she would have this fancy rod and reel. She had one of those cane poles that she put a line on, and she'd come back and just wipe the lake up with you with her bounty. So, she was amazing, but she was always kind and never said an ill word about anyone, man. And this is, you know, an African-American woman in the South, you know, who is educated in life, but not, you know, a college degree or anything like that. But she was always kind. And then my grandfather, who was incredibly special to me, he showed me what work ethic did. He didn't talk a lot, but when he did, it was always wisdom, man. You know, he used to call me Bookie. He's like, well, Bookie, you know, this is how you go about that. Or I don't know where Bookie came from, but that was his name, Bookie. It was Bookie. And I remember that my stepfather, as I mentioned on several podcasts before, he had his own struggles, and being loving and encouraging wasn't one of his strong suits. So let's just say that. So my grandfather had a car that my stepfather, you know, told me that I had to buy because there was a deal on it. And the engine locked up on me after a few months. And so it was at my cousin's house that was about 30, 40 minutes from my you know, home, and about 50 minutes away from where my grandfather lived. And my grandfather was, at this time, he had to be in his late 60s or 70s. No, he had to be in his 70s. So my grandfather told me, no, I called my stepfather and said, listen, the car broke down. Can you come and help me?
Uh-oh.
And I called him because thank you for getting me in this fine mess by telling me to get this. But he just like, what do you want me to do about it? And that was it. So I called my grandfather. Man, it's 11 o'clock, 11:30 at night. This man who's never missed a day of work in his life, gets out of bed and comes to help me.
Yeah.
And my grandfather and grandmother had 18 children, and let's say each one of them had 2 to 3 children. So, he's responding like this to everybody, because we all see him the same way.
Wow.
And so when they both passed, I remember not being sad, but I remember just being grateful. Even at that young age, with my grandfather, I was really, when my aunt died, I was really young, maybe like not even a teenager yet. And my grandfather, I was a teenager. And I remember just being so grateful for the example that they gave me. And so it was more of a gratitude and missing them. But when my friend died this week, it was more. It was a loss.
Let's see if we can take a moment to tease out a few things that our viewers might benefit from. We're both experiencing loss and grief, but there are things that we both can get from them, and everyone can get from things that change. And that includes something as profound as death of a loved one. What are some of the things that you think you could tease out or get from in terms of life lessons that would affect you, that would help you move forward? What kinds of things are you looking at? Are you feeling that you focus on that gets you out of the pure horror and sadness of it and into something a little brighter?
For me, I attributed the way that I dealt with the passing of my aunt, my great aunt, and my grandfather as maybe I was just so young and, I dealt with it differently. And so that's how I kind of rationalized that. But with my friend who passed away this week, because I had a really rough day when her husband called me and told me, as he was saying, "Hey, Keith, I don't know if I'm gonna get through this." And we both just started crying at the same time as he was at the hospital. And he was, having her taken off life support. I was just like a mess. And then whenever I shared it with people the next morning, when we had a virtual class, I couldn't even get through it. And my crying affected everyone who watched it. That's what I love about us as human beings. We're very connected and empathetic. When we see somebody else's pain, it's as if it's happening to us. And so I love that. And I never want to lose that. But what helped me get to the other side of it, not get to the other side of it, but to have that grief that I was feeling that was so powerful and strong, to have it dissolve into something that was peaceful. What did that for me is a couple things. One, our friend Pete, having a conversation with him. It was thinking about you and what you shared with the passing of Marie a few weeks earlier when we talked. And so just having you guys as examples, man, and just friends of teachers, and not telling me how to deal with this, but just telling me of how, just listening and talking me and walking with me through it was extremely helpful to me. And along the way, you said something that just really resonated and aligned with my core beliefs of that life is impermanent and that, change happens and it's going to happen, irrelevant of whether you want it or wish it not to happen, as well as acceptance. And I realized that there was something about this process of death, which I'm aware of, like nobody's getting out of this thing alive, nobody. And I realized that there's something about this that I'm not accepting. And if my core belief is that, and some people believe in heaven and you go to heaven when the physical form dies, and some people believe other things. I personally believe that we're all one consciousness, and that one consciousness may be for some people, you go to heaven. For me, it's like everything goes back to the original source, and that's consciousness, the universe. And so if I truly believe it, then then my friend is still here. You know, she's one source and it's in different form. But if I don't believe that, then I'm experiencing some serious cognitive dissonance, and my beliefs and my behavior are not aligned. And as you know, that human beings, we struggle and suffer until we align those, you know,
Yeah.
to where your belief and your behavior align. And for some people, they either change their belief to match the behavior. So for example, you know, the belief is that I believe in caring about the environment, but I drive, let's say, some kind of vehicle that gets like 10 miles to the gallon. So those are not aligned. So you either change the belief to say, oh, but this doesn't make that big an impact. It's not that big an impact on the environment. So you change the belief so that you still feel fine driving whatever you drive. And I don't care what you drive, personally. And then there is, or you change the behavior. Like, I don't want to harm animals, so I'm going to only eat plant-based. So you change the behavior to align with that. So I was experiencing this disconnect between what I believe and how I was being affected, allowing myself to be affected by the loss. And once I tapped into that truth of my belief that we're all come from one source, one universe, one consciousness, man, that grief dissolved into this amazing peace. And I had you and Rick, like, I mean, you and Pete, like literally walking down the pathway, holding my little hands, like holding my hand, man, and walking with me. And it was just so beautiful, man, you know, that what you guys mean to me. And I just felt with gratitude that you all helped me get here just by that. And so that's my steps to becoming peaceful regarding it.
Now we're going to have to start crying together. I mean, that's what a tribute. That's so kind of you to say things like that. I know it's true. I feel the same way with you and other friends and family and my son and so forth. And that's something that I think, I don't know quite why this happens only in times of tragedy like what you've experienced, but it does happen that we start to look at other people differently and embrace them stronger and love them harder. And it's too bad that it takes something like that to cause us to be not only vulnerable to our own fears and our own limitations, but also to at the same time want to enhance the relationship and love that we share with others in our lives. But I think that's also another condition of the changing environment, that opportunity is always available. The old idea that one door closes, another opens, and you hate to hear someone dies, that means there's some advantage in it for you. And that's not what I'm saying. What I mean is that creates a different kind of way of looking at death and impermanence, as you said, as kind of a consciousness, which
right?
Yeah, which for you and for many of us, consciousness is a consequence of a life well lived. And it's also a consequence of a living life. Right. So it's sort of a one mandala, one portrait. And I think that in these times that are difficult like this give us a great opportunity to expand and to look beyond what our surface beliefs are into something a little deeper and something that could have more long-term helpful effect, because you are looking at something that has an understanding that goes beyond what's in the day-to-day for us, in the hustle and bustle of getting the deadlines met and the bills paid, that we lose track of what is really happening, which is our lives. I think John Lennon said something like, life is what happens when you're making other plans. You know, you only look forward to the plans and then you forget, yeah, I'm really living this life and I'm not, it's not a dress rehearsal, right? Well, this is another example of that, is not a dress rehearsal. And I think for my loss, my memories of Marie are still intact, and that is part of my consciousness, and I'm sure her memory is intact with everybody that she's met. And that's part of the additional consciousness that goes into what constitutes a human being, dead or alive. And that part of it doesn't die.
Exactly.
What do you think about the notion of coping with not necessarily death, but just the idea of impermanence, whether it's your job or your financial situation or a political situation that may be hard to take for some people? I mean, uh, these are all examples of impermanence, and 2020 has brought a hell of a lot of that here.
Yeah, it has. Well, my take of it is that I have a practice in place for me to remain peaceful, accepting, and grateful, and kind, and a spirit of service at all times. That's a practice I have in place, and we talked about this in all our podcasts. And that practice is performed every single day because neither one of us want to suffer. We want to experience joy and vitality, and we want to make a difference. And for a life purpose that is that audacious, that daring, it requires us to beat on that like it matters, like it really does. And so because of that, I just see that the practice is another benefit of it is that it's suitable for situations that are just like what we've been dealing with in 2020. Like it's that's why we have it. And it's because I don't need it when the weather is 70 degrees and the water is warm. Yeah, I don't need it then. I need it when it's a straight up hurricane tsunami rolling in with impermanence and change. That's when I need my practice. I don't need it when life is lining up just the way that I want it to or desire it to be. I need it when it's not. And so
the reason why it's called practice is that you have to practice it when it is 70 degrees and the water is warm, right?
Exactly.
You just can't call on it like saying, oh my God, I'm in trouble. Let me try to do this stuff.
Yeah.
It's not that way. It's a whole life approach, right?
It's a whole life approach. And so, I started practicing it. I started doing the practice during a time that I was suffering is what, and often that's the case. There's something that, as you mentioned before, that awakens you to this person who's in your life that you didn't always appreciate or show gratitude for or love for before. And then they pass or something happens. And then all of a sudden you start appreciating it. And in my case, I was suffering at the time and I started developing this practice. But I knew that I needed to be able to call on it like taking a breath. Like I needed to be my normal. And so I had to practice it during the times that were stable, so to speak, so that when times became challenging, I could tap into it. Because if I waited to the challenging time, I would just go back to my basic instinct default behavior, which is, the house is on fire, my house is on fire, grab the women and children, we're getting the hell out of here. Like,
or the human default is it's somebody else's fault. Why is this happening to me?
Amen.
Blame.
Right? They're cousins. They're one or two. Yeah. Like I got both of them strapped in. I'm carrying them out like they're babies. So, yes, that's where I would have gone for sure. But, it's like the person who has this nice, quiet yoga space at home. It's all zen. They got the mandala on the wall behind them. They got the Buddha on the desk. They got their prayer beads around them. They got the waterfall, and then they're doing their yoga practice every day. And then they walk out, and the kid dropped the vase, and they lose it and start cursing the kid out. No, 5 seconds ago you were Mr. Meditation, and
that's right.
Now you're not getting Parent of the Year awards because you're screaming at your kid. So I need my practice to go beyond this 10-hour, silent retreat to it. I need it to be present and functional and effective in life. And fortunately, life gives us a ton of practice. So for me, Rick, to answer your question, it's this very reason that I have this practice to deal with impermanence. So, and when something shows up for me that I haven't dealt with before, it may take me a while to get my bearings, but then I come back to this because the practice is going to happen, every morning. It starts off formally, And then throughout the day, when something happens, somebody doesn't greet me the right way, somebody in this case is not wearing a mask or not wearing it as I think it should be worn properly above the nose. When that's not happening, I don't lose it, and make them an enemy. I'm able to be like, oh, that's my practice right now. Don't judge that a comment. Keep moving. Your path is kindness. So all of that helps me every single day. And this was something that I haven't, experienced since I began doing the practice 5 or 6 years ago. I hadn't experienced this situation. So what happened was, with the loss of a friend this week, my practice showed me, oh, here's another area regarding attachment that needs work. Mm-hmm. And I was able to, and to your point, see the possibility and the opening here to bring peace to this area right now. Whereas before, for me, it would have been just a tremendous amount of guilt. And like, how could this happen? Is there anybody to blame? Oh, but she was so healthy. Like, all the things that the mind tries to go to explain stuff away and make sense of, which is all, for me, like, maybe some of that's informative of things that I can do differently in my life, if there was something that was responsible for it. But for right now, it's to return back to being really respectful of the impermanence of life, to see that even in situations like that, there's an opening to be present and conscious and loving and grateful. And then finally, if I do need something, if the mind needs something to make sense of that, the way that I make sense of it is okay, if I believe that there is one consciousness and that what happens to this physical form, it goes back into that one consciousness in the universe. Okay, how am I going to honor this newfound opening? Well, man, my resolve to live up to the physical example that, my friend provided is to do that with more zest and more zeal. So that's how I'm doing it. And fortunately, I've had some practice with it, as I've aged, and I'm 50 years old now, losing a step or two and accepting that, muscle tone, and all the things that come with the body aging, all of that has been really, as you get older, you really become aware of impermanence from personally, from a physical state. And so man, like, I'm just getting practice left and right. And hopefully these lessons aren't lost.
Yes. Well, I really like the words that you use, the present, loving, conscious, and also kindness. But all those four things are all a choice, aren't they? There's something that they don't happen. And I think the way people look at it might be a little backwards. It's like, I'll be kind if the world is kind to me. Right. But until the world shows its cards, by God, I'm not going to be a pushover.
Right.
And the payoff for that is your ego feels protected.
Absolutely.
But your soul is decaying and starving. If you flip it around, though, and you say, my religion is kindness, or my approach in life is kindness, and I want to be conscious and present in every moment and experience every moment for what it is. Very, very difficult to do. But if that's the practice and the mindset, and you able to accomplish it on some level, your whole heart opens and your life becomes a lot easier to live, in my judgment.
Absolutely. And this something that's out of Buddhism, is Zen, Rick, is something like, with regards to death, for what the soul weeps for, the spirit rejoices, or something like that. Yeah. Grief. And, it's one of those things too, when people say, hey, get back to your routine, stay on the present moment. It's so easy when you are, when I was attached to my friend being here and really having a hard time dealing with the loss, when one person said that to me, the old me before the practice would have been like, how can you be so insensitive? Like, I'm grieving here right now. Like, they really meant a lot to me. And now that I've done the practice, I'm like, man, this person really gets it. They're not saying get over it by, in a way that's not acknowledging the impermanence of life, or that the physical form of my friend is no longer here. They're saying it in a way of just a gentle reminder of, like, you want to allow yourself to see this as an opening to live more fully, to be joyful, to be kind, to be grateful, to be present. And so I was so grateful to my friend Donna this week, who kind of just said those things to me. She was great. Everybody was great, but Donna said that, and that complimented what you and Peter said earlier in the week.
Well, and one other, I think, byproduct of that kind of thinking is the idea that, we're all sort of in this together. We're all living a life of consciousness, and we're in a living form. And, it's just a reminder that we're all the same, and the end is the same. Nobody, as you said, gets off the planet alive. You used to say, and I love it still at my old age, I think of it every day and I get a chuckle. Father Time is undefeated, it's true.
That's right.
But that's the concept, though, that will help you, I think, demystify, or at least somewhat, to me, bring comfort with the idea that there's a limited amount of time, and you always have choice about how you want to spend that amount of time. And the choices about being conscious and loving and present and kindness are always available to you. Your ego doesn't want you to mess with them. But if you can get there, death, impermanence, all sorts of other things that create hassles for us go away.
I totally agree, and the presence piece is so important. And the old me would see that this finite amount of time that we have here, like Father Time coming, before the practice, I looked at it like YOLO. You only live once, so you better go out, swing and do it all, do it great. But, that's not me anymore. Me now is, I only live in this particular expression of consciousness in this physical form. Right now, I'm only living it once. And I want gratitude, love, kindness to just flow out of me. And that is a very different kind of way of living that is about inclusiveness. It's about, being a contribution to humanity. And for me, I can't speak for anyone else. For me, it's not self-serving like YOLO was for me before. Because before, I was like, dude, when we get on the ski trip, when we go snowboarding, the snow better be perfect, or I don't know when I'm going to get back here again. Now I'm just like, I may not get back here again.
Yeah.
If the snow isn't perfect, I'm going to enjoy it. At least we got each other to talk and be with. Like, I'm very much, dude, that's such more of a peaceful way to go. To live life and go through it. So, before we close, Rick, is there anything else you want to share about, impermanence and this idea of loss?
Well, loss is inevitable, I guess. And I think we both know that you can still feel a tremendous sense of loss and sadness and disappointment about not having more time with a loved one. But it's always a reminder that we are going there ourselves, and that life presents choices for us, and that the choices ought to be made with the idea of the greatest good for the greatest number of people, including yourself, possible.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, Rick, I thank you so much, man. And like I said, even when we don't do a podcast or we don't see each other face to face, you are walking by me, hand on my shoulder. You're like, come this way, little bird. Come this way. Get back on the path, Keith. Thank you so much. I love you.
I love you, and I learn from you, and I appreciate our loyal and wonderful and long now friendship. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you, Rick.